Welcome to Mattys Mental Health Podcast, aiming to spread awareness on mental health by sharing the real life stories. Jessica Compton is here today. How's it going, Jessica?
I'm great. And how are you?
Very good. I'm very good. You're all the way from Ontario. You say Hamilton, right?
Yeah, Hammer City.
Hammer City. I was there briefly one time. Seems like a nice place.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, it has its perks and then has its downfalls, but what city doesn't, right? It's all how you choose life. So
Do you ever go to any CFL games? Just curious. I'm jumping right into it here.
no, I haven't. I'm not really like, into sporty stuff, but I mean, I'm all about concerts. So I've
Oh
went to
yeah,
tons
yeah.
of concerts here. We've got a stadium here. So yeah.
This is probably the same stadium, the Tiger Cat Stadium or whatever.
Yes, actually, sorry, I have been to a Tiger Cat game. It was for a nomination, so I actually got to have like lunch with the Tie Cats.
Oh really?
Yeah, it
Just
was
a
a little
bunch of
awkward because I'm
football
not really a
players.
football person.
Yeah, just a bunch of big guys eating lunch with them. Um, so you are doing a whole bunch of things, and why don't I let you describe what you're doing?
Yeah, so I have my own organization. It's called Tree of Stars, and our mission statement is promoting mental health and addiction recovery by telling our story through music and art and resources. So we utilize each platform as a different way to peer support and come up with community projects to collaborate. And so a couple of the projects that we have done is a couple CD releases for charity, and then we've been involved in two documentaries, one being out in LA, and just being involved in those film festivals. And then with our Instagram, we interview different musicians and artists and resources around the world on Instagram. And since March of 2020, I just hit over 400 guests, so that's been super busy.
Wow,
And just going live on TikTok twice a day for peer support. We've got some workshops and events going on. So there's on Instagram, there's a link in our bio every Wednesday. It's free. People can drop in. There's meditation, journaling, and we have a different musician every week just coming in. And that's sponsored by Long and McQuaid and a couple other people too. So, in the past, before the pandemic, we used to come up with hugging events for 12 hours, just, getting a hugging crew together and just hugging people for 12 hours.
12
Um,
hours of hugging. That's awesome.
yeah, I had to go home and stage smudge myself, but
That's now. This was pre-corona.
yeah,
No hugs allowed
absolutely. Now I
anymore.
now I hug myself.
Especially not 12 hours of hugging. I
Yeah,
think that would shut the whole country down.
yeah. I mean, yeah, you can go onto my YouTube as well, and I go into well, before COVID, just going into youth shelters, talking about how I was an ex-bully and sharing my story. So currently, I'm on a podcast tour around the world. Just I've been on like probably 30 plus podcasts in the last 6 months, just sharing my story and utilizing it as a message of hope, but also as a resource to share the light and share the love.
That's awesome and beautiful. And I'm glad you're here today. Thank you so much for being here and reaching out and finding my page. Um, so how long have you been doing the Tree of Stars?
Yeah, since April 2017, I registered, and in the beginning it was really quiet and slow, and I'd go into cafes and utilize their space to have these peer support groups. And it started off as just me sitting by myself, handing out brochures and business cards, and just kind of going on, like, I guess you could say, a cafe tour of Hamilton. And then, just before COVID, there was almost like 50 people in the cafe, where the cafe owners were like, all right, Jess, like, this is the max, and I was like, sorry, but not sorry, just because
Yeah,
it was showing that my outreach was out there. And
yeah,
some of the events I would just, set up a mic and get people to share some poetry, or if it was sharing their stories, and yeah, just moving around all over the place.
wow, that's awesome. Um, so let's get right into it. So where did this all start for you, and what's your story?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start back as far as I can remember. So I was my sister and I were found under a bed. We were abandoned by our mother, who was into alcohol and drugs. My father left my mom, and you know, my mom was, I guess in the courts, she wasn't allowed to have custody of my sister and I. So we were placed in the foster care system a year
How
after
old were
they
you
found
guys?
my dad. Sorry.
Sorry to cut you off there, but how old were you guys when you guys were found?
Yeah, we were about 5, 6 years old. Um, Going into the foster care system for about a year. They contacted my dad. My dad came and took custody of us. We moved up to North Bay for a bit, and so that's where I guess my layers of trauma started. Is yes, I was abandoned, but in different ways throughout my life. But that was mainly the thing of just being, left alone at that age. But moving up to North Bay, I was, there was a party going on at my dad's house out in the country, and there was a guy who came in my room and took me out of the house and put me in his car. I remember it being raining and it was dark. I was 7 years old. So after a couple hours after the sexual assault, he returned me. He returned me back into my bed. I remember smelling the alcohol. I remember even at one point like my eyes like rolling back. And so yeah, I told my dad. I got checked out by the hospital and got into some therapy. And there was other sexual assaults that had happened and physical abuse, just with a family member. There was a babysitter, a neighbor. I was put into a different foster home because of my behaviors, just wetting to bed and setting fires. Like I was just like a giant mess. And, being 8 years old, 9 years old, not knowing what was going on. And yeah, just so all these different types of abuse. I was acting out at school. I started bullying kids and taking out all my anger out on them. And yeah, and then I guess fast forwarding to my teenage life.
I don't want to slow you down too much, but so like after that initial first trauma you mentioned there, you did tell your dad. Was that hard to like imagine at that age, like to open up to your dad, or did you? How was that?
Yeah, I mean, I was shaking and I was in shock. But my sister actually took my hand and said, "We have to go tell dad what
Oh,
happened."
wow.
And so yeah, initially my sister had taken my hand and brought me downstairs to tell my dad. And I just remember my dad just not to say this out loud, but he was just like, Jesus Christ. And I was like, you know, and so yeah, like I said, I was checked out by the hospital, and I believe they found the individual and knew who he was. And there was no contact after that. But yeah, and just the therapies, like I said, I went to many years of therapy throughout my whole entire life, and still to this day I still go to therapy. So um yeah, so I think I was fast forwarding just to my teenage life, like with all the layers of trauma and the behaviors and the continuous trauma. Like I said, I was placed into a couple other foster homes where there was another sexual assault that happened with a foster care sibling, and there was a foster dad. So everywhere I moved, it was like, oh my gosh, like there's nowhere to me. There was like, I remember being like nine,
No
10 years
safety.
old, standing at a bridge going, I just want my life to end because I don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah.
Everywhere I went, it was like, trauma, trauma. So I got a taste of my own medicine of some drugs and alcohol, and just numbing my whole entire soul and hitting rock bottom a bunch of times. I expressed to you before that I was arrested four times and incarcerated each time. Um, yeah, and I don't know if you have any questions up to there, or I can keep going.
So as far as like foster homes, like so was it the same kind of thing with your dad where you were like kind of in a foster homes um, with him as well, like after you moved there with him?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a foster home to a foster home, because so to this day I'm still friends with my last foster home I was in, and they even said like they didn't have enough education or training for the trauma and my behaviors that I was going through.
Yeah.
um and like I said, once I started getting into the drugs and running away, it was just, I was sleeping in friends' garages and closets and Salvation Army bins, like anywhere that I could sleep so that nobody would find me, because I just felt like that was my safe place. Like everywhere I went, I was being abused in some way, or something bad would happen. So it was like, I just want to be on my own. So I've been on my own since I was 15. Um, yeah, just kind of, I was back then, I was couch hopping and doing drugs. And like I said, when I was arrested, I think that was my savior, my fourth time, where every time I got arrested, I was incarcerated. So each time it got me clean again. It got me, taking care of myself, but still not knowing in the back of my head, what I'm doing or what my purpose was.
Yeah. Right. And how old were you at these times of getting arrested?
Yeah, age 15 to 19. So my last criminal offense was when I was an adult, which was an indictable offense. I'm not ashamed to talk about each charge. Like I blew up I blew up some telephone booths. I know when I was 15 years old, I just set the phone booth on fire and it like blew up.
Nice.
Yeah, so there was like four of them. I was just walking down the street and I was downtown and I was like so high and I was with some friends and I just lit the phone book on fire and and then I heard boom and I look back and I'm like, oh shit. And so like I said, like I'm 44 now. This is back when I was 15.
Yeah.
Um and yeah, so I got charged for that and then I assaulted a police officer, I escaped custody, and then I stole a car.
Wow.
So
How, yeah. How was uh how was that experience? Was it just like kind of I gotta get out of here, I gotta be away from this person, and I gotta get a car? And how did that whole experience go?
yeah, I mean, each charge was I was on some sort of drug each time. It wasn't even me, it was the drug. But
Yeah.
yeah, we were on our way to a concert. There was me and a couple girls, and we were doing some drugs, and we're like, well, it's 3 hours away. Like, we're gonna miss this concert. We had our tickets on us, and we went to this truck stop, and there was a car sitting there, and it was running. And I looked around, and I looked at the girls, and I was like, hop in. I know how to drive. And we legit like started driving and we were good for about 2 hours. And then as I was driving down the highway, this cop just like turned his car. And then I was like, oh shit. And like we had to like literally swallow all of our drugs because I was like, we're going down, but we're not going down for all this other stuff. So I just like literally ate a bunch of mushrooms and speed. And when the officer was like halfway through the arrest and telling us what our rights were and stuff, I was giggling. And just because I was so high.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then even just when I assaulted a police officer, I was I bit him. I was so high that when he went to go arrest me, like I turned my head and I like bit his hand. Um, and even just with escaping custody and stuff, it was all planned out. Like I had different clothing on, I had it all set out, and but yeah, I mean, that's the layers of trauma mixed in with drugs and alcohol. So when we talk about mental health and addiction recovery, here I am telling my story and then, utilizing my resources. Yes, I've been in, therapy and for years and years, but I went back to school. I graduated from high school and I went to college to be a correctional officer.
Right.
So being on that side and then studying, case management and criminology and psychology and just really understanding myself, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like a walking product here.
Right. So, so that was the last time you got arrested, and then, so did you go to jail for a while and get out, and then that's when you decided to start kind of this new life?
Yeah, I went to college and the unfortunate part is that there was so many places that would not take me as a co-op student because I had a criminal record and I had a criminal record as an adult. And that criminal record still plays a part of my today life. I need a waiver to cross the US border. So that cost me $1,000 every 5 years. But with the indictable offense, when I say indictable offense, it's a more serious crime when I was 19. So once I was done, my incarceration time, I still had a probation. So I finished my probation and then I had to wait 7 full years until I could apply for a pardon. So then I applied for a pardon and then that took 3 years. So it took me 11 years to get into my career, working with youth at risk and doing what I wanted to do. So to this day, do I have a criminal record? No. Do I have to get a waiver? Yes, because the US actually banned me from crossing the border until I got a waiver. And every time I go, they always take my fingerprints and take my photo. And it just replays it all over again, which is, I don't know if it's a moneymaker or safety net. I have no idea to this day why. I mean, it's been 20 years.
Wow. Yeah. Um, so during that 11 years, were you working as what's it called? An officer at the jail?
Yeah, no, I graduated. I tried to volunteer in some places, and even if it wasn't the best volunteer place, I just I really tried to stay, focused or in connection with any sort of volunteer. But my dad actually got me a job at a factory making really good money, and I remember him putting his finger in my face and saying like, "Don't mess this up," kind of thing. And yeah, I made really good money for 7 years, and and then the place closed. And then I worked at a couple other places just doing, janitorial work, anybody that would take me. And then after that, once my record was clear, I jumped into my first actual career, and I ended up staying with the same agency for 15 years.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I was a child and youth worker for 15 years, and in that 15 years, I worked at the school board. So I've been kind of juggling both jobs as a full-time and part-time, just working with youth and just trying to make a difference.
Wow. Um, yeah, so the last 15, wow. So
Makes me old.
what's that?
I said it makes me old, but I'm young at heart.
Yes. Um, so what was your experience like? Imagine like during that 11 years, you're just like thinking about your decision and what led you there and kind of like, you know, I imagine it felt like really good to finally get to the career you really wanted to do.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, a Nike commercial, just do it, right? But at the same time, the struggle to get to that finish line, I had to like every day, no matter what I did, I had to make that choice to say like I need to stay clean, and I need to stay clear of all kind of negativity and clear my path, because, you know, applying for a pardon, they're going to call your old landlords or your old jobs. And that meant I had to like have a clean record no matter where I went. It's like I had to be nice to everybody. And which was hard because some people don't deserve that door to be open for them. So
Yes. Yeah. Um, so what what was your drug of choice? Were you addicted? And how was that process getting clean?
yeah, in the beginning it was just a bit of alcohol and weed. Then I wanted more, and more and more alcohol and weed. The buzz wasn't enough, so I got into the coke. I got into mushrooms, mixing mushrooms with speed, ecstasy, and anything I could really get my hands on. And the other piece is, if I couldn't afford that in some way, I would even just, there was a group of us that we would stay up for like 2-3 days just to get a buzz of like not having sleep, and we look like death all over. And there's moments when I look back to, like, I drank 36 beers and I was sober. I like literally drank myself sober. I was like, well, that was a waste of money. Like, what the hell?
Wow.
But the reality is that, I would be at parties, and I had friends that would even just, stick their fingers down my throat going, oh my gosh, she's going to OD. And they're like, you're not, you just took so much. And, there's points where even just like self-medication, mixing a sleeping pill with, a caffeine pill, and just trying to like navigate my moods and my numbness, and not getting that professional help. So um when you put some meat in a freezer and it's frozen and you take it out, it starts thawing. So I was slowly thawing, and life wasn't great when I opened my eyes thinking that I have to deal with all that garbage inside my head, because eventually it's just going to eat me up. So yeah, I went to rehab, and I started learning about the basic values of taking care of myself, and what self-care was. And yeah, even just if it was writing in a journal, if it was, taking a walk, any kind of self-care practices, but really, really deep down inside, did I want to change? Yes, I did, but there was also this pull to like, I just want to numb it. So
It's kind of like that internal battle.
Yes.
And how was therapy? So you still go, and you did back then even when you were a kid, but how was therapy, and how was unpacking all these things and kind of learning how to face it and learning the self-care?
I've had many different therapists and different type of therapists. One of them being a probation officer who made it mandatory that I go seek drug counseling, and I had to sign in. I had to, so I think a part of me being arrested was like a forced help. And that being said, I also along my path met this wonderful lady who's a social worker, and we became such good friends that she closed me off her case, and so much that she was my maid of honor in my wedding.
Oh wow,
And
that's awesome.
yeah, she went that extra mile. So I think just when I look back in my different therapies, I can still hear the voices of like different therapists saying different things and why they said what they said, because now that I'm older and, continuing this self-healing journey, I look back and go, okay, like there's a reason why they said what they said, and even principals like and teachers, like it wasn't just art therapy. It was the supports around me. Like I was living on my own in my own little apartment downtown, and teachers would be like, are you okay for food, or do you need shampoo? If you ever need anything, come to me. So I think when we're looking at therapies, there's like additional support around those therapies for people that care. And that's for sure a therapy.
For sure, like community, right? Like community support, having those connections with people is huge.
Yeah. And just knowing the resources. Like I used to go to the food bank all the time, and being homeless and not knowing where I'm going to sleep next, you'd have to work off your food. So you can't just walk into a food bank. They made us like work for, our bag of food, which was good. And I look back and go, you know what, good job on them. Because it's not like you just walk into a place and get food. It's like you have to walk in here, you need to work for your food. If it's sweeping the floor or, washing the dishes, so the name of the place I went to a lot in Hamilton was the Living Rock, and they're just super awesome.
Wow, that's awesome. And how long were you homeless? How long were you in that situation?
How many times was I homeless?
How many times were you homeless?
Yeah, I don't even know. I can tell you that on the top of my head, I've lived in 50 different places, and that's including all the foster homes, including all the, jail cells that I've been in or just passed around. And, the thing is that even when I was homeless, and I feel like there was even moments just before I went to college, um, when I was ready to leave college for my first year, I was like, where am I going to live? So I was always, like I said, I was on my own since I was 15. Nobody was taking care of me. So there was moments where I was like, oh my gosh, I have nowhere to live for 3 weeks. Like I need somewhere to go. And that's my family supports, but my family supports wasn't always there because I would be banging on their door, asking them for money when I was like, still on the drugs, and just not knowing what city, I was in, or if I was going to break into their place, because even though I got arrested 4 times, I never got caught for everything else I did, breaking into places and breaking that trust of support. So
Right.
even my own grandmother wouldn't let me in her house for a while. So
Mhm.
yeah.
So, what are the biggest things you find that you do on a daily basis to maintain your mental health?
So I'm gonna hold up my water. My water is super important to me to keep hydrated. Um, I've always got like my journal with me. I like to keep like my financial budget and calendar with me. If it's bringing like an apple with me. So just like all of these, it's like I guess it's kind of like a really amazing stew where you put all these like yummy things in it and you just want to bite of this and you want to go back for more. So I think just being grounded in different areas. So if it's, emotionally what makes me happy, physically what makes me happy. And I'm not perfect. I mean, I'm human. So even if it's, during the pandemic, if I gained 20 pounds, now I'm trying to walk outside with the other teachers that I work with. So it really is. It's trying to be mindful on what I need and that self-compassion to say, okay, Jess, why are you feeling like this? And what can you do to help yourself? So I think in all the years of therapy, I've kind of just bundled it all together and like what makes me feel good, because what makes you feel good could be completely different. If you're bench pressing and I'm walking, we're completely two different humans. So I think my care package to myself is what works for me in that day and in that moment.
Wow. Yeah, no, I think that's super important, and I think you touched on a good point that it is different for everybody. Did it take you a while to kind of figure all that stuff out? Like, what makes you happy?
Yeah, I call it a Ferris wheel. You know, we're up and then we're down, we're up and then we're down. But when we're down and we're down for a long time, you know, and that long time to me is 2 or 3 days. If I'm feeling down for by day three, I'm like, all right, I gotta figure out a plan here. So knowing what my plan is when I'm down, um, and then that self-care might change. You know, if I'm doing yoga every day, which I don't, but if I'm doing yoga like at least twice a week, you know, some weeks I'm more motivated, different seasons I'm more motivated. But you know, I look back and go, and when I'm journaling in the morning, I'm reflecting on what I did yesterday and what can I do today to make me better. Excuse me. If I'm drinking, you know, it says to drink 2 to 3 liters of water. If I only took 1 liter, okay, well, tomorrow's a new day and I'm going to try a little bit better. But what can I do to drink more water if it's, you know, having it right in front of me at all times, right?
Right. So it's kind of like a constant evaluation, and mindfulness of what you could do and what works, what doesn't work, and how you could make yourself feel better.
Yeah, I think like so I run these journal music meditation groups every Wednesday, and it's free, and it's you know me listening to other people and their stories and their struggles and what they do for self-care. It almost feels like we're in a church because we're all like, yeah, we get it. So everybody kind of just goes like this in the group, and
Yeah.
it's so great because you know, especially like I don't mean to bring up the pandemic, but you know, I've gained 20 pounds since the pandemic, and it's like, okay, I need to be more mindful what I'm putting in my body, because for me to tie up my shoe and feel like I'm out of breath, that's not good. So, but in my life, have I ever experienced to be this heavy? Absolutely not. So I think that my self-care in this moment is, like you said, evaluation of like, what am I going to do about it? So if that's me making sure that I'm buying like, you know, a bunch of fruit and vegetables, or making a plan, which I'm down 8 pounds in the last 3 weeks. So
Oh, good for you.
I'm going somewhere.
Awesome. That's good for you. Yeah, I think that's like, yeah, just being able to evaluate, having a plan. I think that's where people get lost, right? And I think that's so beneficial what you're doing, and you said everybody nods because like it's so easy to get lost when you don't have tools. Like you don't know where to start, and you don't even maybe you don't even know why these things are going on in the first place, like how you ended up here emotionally, and then not having the tools to start to deal with it or start to make yourself feel better.
Yeah, I mean, I work in a school, so I see kids all the time, and I'm like, you should do this, or like I'm constantly telling the little ones to, oh, you should do this, or you should do this, and then at the end of the day, I reflect and I'm like, I'm telling all these guys to do this and this. Well, what do I need to do to make myself feel good too? So I think that absolutely, I have to agree with your word evaluation, because I think until the day we pass away is an evaluation, right? How am I going to make myself better financially? How am I going to make myself more, you know, mindful of what I'm putting in my body? How can I do movement? So even for me, I'm like messaging my teacher saying, "Hey, do you want to go for a quick 10-minute walk in the morning and at night?" So now that I'm already like, okay, I've already walked for 20 minutes. So making a plan is definitely a good goal.
I think like an honest evaluation of yourself too. Like I feel like sometimes we're not honest with ourselves, and that like I think that can really be like emotionally too. Maybe we're pushing off like a relationship isn't going well, but we're kind of sweeping it under the rug, or there's a conversation we really need to have, or maybe it's like the exercise or the or whatever it is. But I think like yeah, just being honest with yourself and really just kind of looking at it like looking at yourself like you would a friend or like a loved one, and trying to give yourself advice or a plan what to do.
Yeah, I just took a self-compassion course. This lady that was up in Thunder Bay, she's a psychiatrist, and she posted this thing on Facebook. I'm like, what is this? So I end up going into this like 6 week course, and it was like an awakening, because she says, what you tell a friend, you should tell yourself. So it just really, really came back to that self-reflection of and that constant self-reflection. And again, I'm not a perfect human. I'm just myself. So like I say all the time, like that Ferris wheel, we're on that Ferris wheel together. We're all up and we're all down. We're all up and we're down. But that plan when we're down is so important. And even when we're up, to remind ourselves that, you know, this is my plan while I'm up here. But yeah, that Ferris wheel, I love to describe it like that Ferris wheel.
No, I really like that too. I really like that too. And yeah, like understanding why things are going good, and then understanding, like, why things are going bad, or understanding what was going on when things were going good. Because it's easy to forget, like, all of a sudden when you're down, um, all those little things. But yeah, I like what you said, like with the course you took. Like, oftentimes I think we're harder on ourselves than we would to a friend. Like, if your friend was in the exact same situation that you are in right now, you'd probably be much more compassionate. Like, we'll tell ourselves this story, like, I'm done, I'm finished, I can't do this anymore, I'm a failure, all this stuff. But if it was like your friend, you'd be like, oh, you're fine, man, just try again, or like whatever the situation is.
Yeah, I know there's a friend of mine, and my friends, I'm just going to leave it at that, knows somebody that is trying to really get into recovery and, living on the streets. So I often, drop off things like a tent or clothes out of my closet or fresh
Right.
produce. And, you know, um, that is a gift, that I can give to other people. And if it's not me, I can always make a post on my social media that, this is what this is going on and this person needs this. Um, and then sharing those resources to those people, saying, you know what, like, if you're willing to stay sober for this amount of time, then these are your resources to go reach out to start getting some treatment. And because I think when we look at addiction, it's definitely, goes back to mental health and mental illness, and which goes into layers of trauma, like I say all the time. But
Hmm.
you know um yeah.
Yeah, 100%. It's just it's all mental health, right? It's self-medication. There's a reason why we do drugs, or why humans do drugs, right? We're masking something, right? So yeah, I think you're 100% right. I think it's the right way to look at it, right? It's easy to see someone that's addicted or an addict or something, or happens to be homeless, but you don't see what happened before. Even like a kid, like, I'm sure you've seen. I've done some work with youth too. Um, you see a kid, maybe their behavior problems, all that stuff, similar to you were at one stage, but you didn't see what happened before. You don't see the story. You don't see the reasons why. It's easy to say, like, oh, they're a bad kid, but there's a whole other
I
world
think that
in themselves.
stigma, there's like a stigma around individuals. So again, I talk about being a bully in my years, and I wish there was another word for bully, because an individual that's struggling. So instead of being called like, oh, he's one of those, or she's going to be, in the newspaper, we're going to read about her. I think that stigma is still there, even though I'm 44 and I look back when I was, 9 or 10. I think also, talking about suicide ideation, I think it should be conversation so that we can connect with each other and talk about it, without people feeling uncomfortable, because we
What's
talk about
ideation? What do
cancer.
you mean by ideation?
Pardon?
What do you mean by ideation? Sorry, I don't know that word.
Ideation, suicide thoughts, suicide plans, so thoughts of suicide. Um, I look back, like, again, when I was like 9 years old, 10 years old, standing at a bridge going, oh gosh, I'm going to do this. And not knowing back then that that's what it was called, right? I knew I wanted to jump, but I didn't know that there was a word called suicide. And even just with, the vocabulary changing to saying committing suicide, where it's now survivor of suicide. So I think that, when I'm talking about that Ferris wheel being low, is, we should know ourselves, but then there's also different mental illnesses where I've got a friend of mine, um, when you're in a manic stage, sometimes it's not, a situation where you can help yourself. So I think, picking up that phone and saying like, oh my gosh, I need help, right?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I not to say that 6 months ago I had any, suicide ideation, but in the pandemic, it's like, how long is this going to go on for? And am I going to be stuck at home? Or like, so if I'm thinking like, not that I wanted to end my life, but oh my gosh, like I don't want to be in this pandemic, right? Is that a thought of suicide? I don't think so, but I need to reach out. And like I said, 6 months ago, I was in that state and I had to reach out to my doctor saying like, I think I need a prescription that's going to lower my anxiety and help me, do this and this. So I think even though I talk about years of therapy, I still need to know what my outreach is for resources.
Yes. Yes, I agree with you. Do you think there's a lack of um, education? I mean, that's why I'm doing this podcast. But do you think there's a lack of education and awareness around suicide, around mental health, around resources, signs and symptoms you can identify in yourself and others, and then resources you can use to get help?
Yeah, so one thing I'm doing in the school right now, I've kind of reversed my role as just going into different classes while we're online and just doing a wellness check-in, asking other students, ages 4 to all the way up to 12, age 12, is going in these different classrooms and saying, raise your hand if you've had water, raise your hand if you've had fruits or vegetables, and I'll say, touch your nose if you've moved today, and then touch both of your ears if you've slept really good last night because you went to bed early. So I'll do things like that. So I think that education piece to teach a 4 and 5-year-old what mindset is, what
Mhm.
wellness is
Mhm.
for ourselves. And I'll even go around and I'll say, okay, everybody in the class, I want you to go around and say one nice thing about your friend beside you. Now I want to reverse that and say one nice thing about yourself. It's amazing how quick they can talk about somebody else. But when it comes to themselves, they're like, you know what, pass. I don't know. I don't know.
Mhm.
So if you're telling me that somebody that's in grade 1 all the way up to grade 7, and there's a bunch of kids, that to me is where's the lack of self-compassion, and they don't even know what self-compassion is, or even just the word creativity. They don't think that they're good enough.
Mhm.
Well, as adults, we're exploiting out there to say I'm enough, I'm loved. So I think that the education piece is, yes, it starts from birth, and then the other piece is as adults, when we get older, if you're going through a marriage and you're going through a divorce and you lose your house and your dog, whatever the story is, been there, done that, um, is coming up with, again, those supports. But when we're talking about suicide, I was just involved in a project with a lady in LA, and she put together, I was a part of it. There was 9 of us that shared our story of suicide. But when I went back and I watched that documentary that night, a couple nights ago, listening to other people's stories, and I had to have the box of Kleenex beside me. But at the end of the day, when we're sharing our light with other people, to say, you know what, please don't take your life because you're worth it, and there is people out there that love you. So I think these virtual supports and even just podcasts like your own is like a huge piece of making a difference.
Yeah, I think so too. I think just sharing, right? It's just like the understanding that we're all human, we all feel these same things, and like not pretending that we don't. It's not even that we're purposely pretending, it's just a lack of awareness, I think.
Yeah.
But I think that's really interesting what you said about the kids, like the lack of self compassion. Um, I think I read a study one time. It was really interesting. Like, you said creativity too. They did a study of like younger kids, like grades 1 to 3 or something, and they measured their creativity as far as like drawing and all that stuff, like story writing, all that stuff. And then they did it again at like grades like 5, 6, 7. It was like way lower, and then by 11 and 12, it was almost gone for most kids.
Mm.
So it's like it makes me think like self compassion. I'm not sure if that's like a societal thing or if that's like a who knows what it is, but like the creative thing, maybe that's part of the way our system is set up.
Yeah, it's like if you ask your friends around you or family members, when's the last time you played in the mud? Like
Yeah.
actually put your hands in the mud and just,
Yeah.
and with wearing like, I don't know, or when's the last time you went on the swing and act like a kid? And I guess the question is like, when do we stop being a kid? Because being a kid is so, fun and creative. But I think there's a point in our lives where it's like, okay, the pressure is on. I have to be an adult. I have to grow up. I have to drive. I have to get a job and I have to do this, this, this. The pressure, right?
Yeah.
And then when we get older, we forget to play.
Yeah. I think play is super, super important for mental health. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Like we don't play, and then like why like at what age do we just say like, oh, I'm an adult now, I'm too old to basically have fun? Like, you know what I mean? Too old to have fun. But no, I think that's super interesting, and I think that's a big thing that could really help. Like just the reduction of anxiety from doing those things is just, and creative, like being creative, and um it's really just comes down to like humans being in their natural habitat. Like you think about hunter gatherers, like what we've been for the last 2 or 3 million years, whatever the number is. Like we were just outside playing with each other. We're connected to each other in a small community, and we're just constantly like, we're playing. Like we had to like hunt and gather and stuff, but like we're playing in mud pretty much.
Yeah, like I just asked my class yesterday. I was like, "When's the last time you hugged a tree?" And then they were like, "I've never hugged a tree." I'm like, "What are you talking about? You've never hugged a tree?"
Yeah.
I get my partner to do it, and she after a whole minute, she just started smiling. She wasn't having a good day. And then I'm like, "Hug a tree." And then she hugged it, and after a minute, she's like, "Well, that feels really good." And I'm like, "You know what? Because in this pandemic, we can't hug everyone, but we can hug ourselves, we can hug a tree, right?" And I just definitely think that self-reflection of self-compassion, like be good to yourself, you know?
Yeah. No, it's super important, and it's, yeah, I don't think it's talked about enough. I don't think, yeah, and like I think these things, I think it's awesome what you're doing, and like being involved in schools, because I think just teaching it as young as possible is super important. A lot of people, adults, they don't know it. I'm just starting to learn it, and it sounds like you learned it too a little later in life. And like, there's so much. Life's hard enough. You don't have to be hard on yourself. Doesn't mean you don't keep yourself accountable, but you don't have to be um, your own worst enemy, and that's what happens a lot, I think.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? I'm going to turn the tables for a second. Is
Sure.
if I were to ask you how you're doing today, 1 out of 10, what would you say and why?
I would say about a 7. Um, I went for a walk this morning with my dogs, so I do that every day, and it's pretty sunny today, so it was a nice day. I had a client this morning. It went good. Personal trainer, and then I was doing some coursework this afternoon, and then we hopped on here, and yeah, after this I'll probably do a workout, drink some water, eat some food, and then I'll be feeling better.
Yeah. So I challenge this to everybody is that the next time you ask somebody how they're doing, ask them how they're doing 1 out of 10. And it's so weird because I was walking down the hallway. Usually everybody's like, I'm a 7, I'm an 8, I'm a 10, I'm a 2. And my principal, I asked him one day and he looked at me, he goes, I'm an 8.5. And I'm like, an 8.5. I was like, you just caught me off guard. But I run this, that's how I greet my students. And that's how I greet some of the kids that I run programs with is, how you doing 1 out of 10? So my question is when you are feeling like a 2 or you are feeling like a 4, how are you going to bump that up? So if you're a 7, how are you going to move it to an 8? And this is where I jump into the wellness, like, and even for myself, and I'm honest with my students, or anybody that I work with to say, you know what, it's been 3 days and I'm feeling like a 2. But looking around us, like as that education part with the little ones, now they're running the program and I just stand back and, I've got somebody in grade 1 going, okay, I'm running program today. I just want to check to see how everybody's doing 1 out of 10. And you got like a grade 1 running this program now. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they're just loving it. So it's just having fun, being yourself and just doing check-ins and knowing your resources, right?
No, that's really awesome. Yeah, yeah, that's really awesome. Like, yeah, that skills that use forever, and it just goes back to the what we were saying earlier about self-awareness. And yeah, I really like that metric, one out of 10.
Yeah. I mean, you just gotta when you're dealing with I mean, I work in a kindergarten class too sometimes, and when they're 4 years old, I think they do better with like emojis, just
Yeah.
because some of them don't know how to count to 10 yet.
Yeah.
So you're like, how are you feeling? Or if you do the thumbs up, and then we kind of do a thumb like this or like a thumb like that. So even if that was like, a 10, a 5, and a 0.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Happy, sad.
Yeah.
It's just like the straight line for the middle one. Just mouth is just straight line.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just neutral. Um. So just one more question for you, I guess. Like how so you've been doing a lot of stuff online. How have like been the interviews gone for you? You said you did like 400.
Yeah. So back in March 2020, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm at home, and how am I going to stay connected to people? Because I've ran like music events and art events and, promoted other organizations. And I was like, how am I going to stay connected with community and collaboration? So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do a 60-day music series. So I reached out to a bunch of musicians, and I went live even one weekend. I think I told this to you, mentioned this to you before, where I had like 22 musicians in one weekend. And I was in my room, and I got all like, did my hair, and I was getting dressed up, and I was wearing a headset like you, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So there was people from like Australia, Germany, like it was a 60-day music series, and yeah, it was super awesome. And then people were like, well, now what? And I was like, and now we're gonna keep going.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, I went from like 500 followers to like, I think as of today, I'm at like 3,100. And it's literally just me interviewing different organizations that support mental health and addiction. If it's having a yoga instructor come on, a meditation instructor, or if it's crisis lines, and then a bunch of musicians and artists from all over. So I go live every day, and mostly on weekends. Weekends are mostly like musicians and artists, but throughout the week I try to keep it to organizations. But sometimes a musician pops in, or so yeah. I'm just trying to live by the lives.
You inspire me so much right now to do way more interviews.
Well, it's the exchange of energy too. Like when I hop on these interviews, it's also behind the scenes trying to help others navigate. They're like, I've never been on Instagram live before. And I'm like, okay, well, this is step one, step two. And then they get all excited. They're like, oh my gosh, I've never been live before.
Mhm.
So it's
Yeah.
the excitement and the exchange of energy. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna help you, you're gonna help me, and we're just gonna help everybody.
Mhm. And yeah, and then this interview is gonna help. And it's like I find too, like you probably do too, from the people who've interviewed, like it usually helps the person. It's like they're getting out of their comfort zone and sharing, um, especially when it's like an individual opposed to like a organization, or to share their story.
I just tell people to be themselves. I mean, if you want to say 100 times, like we're not standing in front of like some professor in a university that's marking us. Just come on, be yourself, make mistakes. I had a musician last night. She made a mistake and giggled, and she's like, "Oh, I'm going to start over." And I was like, "Well, that means that we get you here longer."
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
you just gotta be yourself and go with the flow.
No, 100% agree. 100% agree. I think that's all the questions I have for you. I just want to say thanks so much for coming on. I think it's really awesome, all the things you're doing.
Thank you. And like I said, I'm on a podcast tour, and I would love to reverse the tables and have you on as well, and share energies and share you as a resource. I'm sure you got some virtual workouts going on over there, so it doesn't matter where we are in the world. I mean, we're all one big community. So, I mean, I guess in closing, just spread the love, be the love, and be kind to yourself. Stay safe, self-care, and stay connected.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thanks so much. I'll definitely hop on sometime. Have a great day.
Thank you, you too, and thanks again for having me.